is that labor codes have been recently introduced, and there has been a fair amount of discussion around it over the last 3 months, 3.5 months, 4 months. Lot has been talked, lot has been discussed. There have been every now and then publications, clarifications by the institute, by the ministry, FAQs. The whole idea behind all this happening is that there is a lot to be desired, lot to be understood, lot to be clarified, because indeed it's one big move in the you know changes that we are bringing about to the various regulations. Uh, why is it important? The answer is very clear that over the last 2 or 3 decades, we've been talking about transformation of our systems, policies, uh, regulations. These laws are a big part of that entire policy shift. These policies or these regulations are archaic in many ways and have been modified, worked along, improved as and when things came. But we've come to a point where a lot needs to be changed, and uh, a whole rewrite of the whole system is imperative. Now, we've had four main areas where we realized that changes had to be made. One was, and this also comes from the fact that we have a federal system of the government. The first thing was clearly talked about the IDD. I must talk about the indirect tax, is because that has been a game changer for businesses, game changer for the government, revenue, everything. And we realized that the journey from the time it started till now has been troublesome but fruitful. So that was the first reform. The second we are talking about is labor. Well, it started in 20, and we've kind of just come about to now relook at it more in a global platform. When I say global, all India. Uh, in fact, the government had talked about two other ones, which was agriculture, and the fourth was land. We still have a long way to go on that, but I'm not going to deviate into that. Let's talk about labor codes, which is the point of discussion for today. Uh, Let me quickly introduce you to the other gentlemen who are going to be speaking on this webinar today. I have now Badri joining in, and his colleague will be coming in. The reason why we have two people who are both lawyers by profession, interestingly, that's an interesting part of that's also the reason why we have. I'm a chartered accountant and they are lawyers, and we are both together to put our heads together to kind of give you a perspective how the legal fraternity and the legal requirement of the law, and then there is a business side of it, and the financial implications and or the intricacies. Let me use the word intricacies, which are important because the people that we are talking to, the people we are discussing with, have questions on both sides, and therefore we thought let's make it interesting. Why not have people from both sides who would talk about the different aspects of this labor code vis-a-vis the law and the business side of it. Without much ado, let me get in Badri. Badri, for people who don't know him, although people know him very well in the business circle, but just to quickly give an introduction, is a lawyer by profession, is an advocate, and he works with Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan. Again, a very, very well known law firm with presence uh, both in the domestic as well as the international circuit. I must say that. Badri himself, great guy, um, well, uh, what I would say, uh, well known, uh, very, very knowledgeable, and Badri, a good-looking guy. Huh? So let me take everything. That's what makes him very special uh, to have him join this session. And I mean, I can keep talking about what he does in terms of, international tax disputes, litigations. I mean, there is a whole lot I can talk about. But you know what? I'll leave it here because you can always go and read about him on his LinkedIn profile, and you realize a very, very interesting guy to know. Nurul works very closely with him, so they make a formidable team. and I'll welcome you both for this webinar. The way we're going to lead this webinar, just to quickly put it, we're going to have about 40 minutes of talk time, and after that, we'll have 15 minutes for questions. We have going to be putting an email ID in the chat box. People who have questions after that should write to them, and that's how it's going to be. You're gonna be on unmute for the time being, and as and when you have questions, we will take it up, but that will be at the end. So I just thought I'll put some ground rules to the discussion. Badri, may I now call you to please present your views on this wonderful topic? Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. And it's been a pleasure to be part of this session. And a few weeks ago, Rajiv and I and Nurul, we were having a discussion on the impact that the labor code is having. One, of course, from a financial point of view, but just from a compliance and the chaos that it was creating. And I thought Rajiv and I got on quite well. And of course, Nurul added to the fire. So here we are. We are collaborating together as ASA and this thing. As you know, some of the biggest problems in the world are now solved by collaborations, and it's not any one person's unique territory. And I found the discussions with Rajiv, his team, ASA, Baker Tilly, to be extremely enriching. So here we are. Thank you, Rajiv, for this introduction. I'm happy to know that my good looks also have something to play in it. So I will leave it at that. Though the jury is out, but the among the three of us, the real good-looking person is Nurul. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. So okay, so what are we going to do over the next few slides, as Rajiv said, is that we're going to try and do a bit of a jugalbandi. This is going to be an open session. I'm going to act as a panelist, moderator, disruptor of sorts. And Rajiv and Nurul are probably going to try and play along. And where involved, they're going to give some inputs. I'm going to try and have some conversations in between. So let's see how it is. And Rajiv, as you know, is no less mischievous. So on to and on forward. So the first thing is like the basic stuff, okay, which is when should I get my in place, and is this such a big deal that everyone is making out to be? So the answer to both of them is that the plan is to get it done now, and yes, it's a big deal. Okay, it's going to have an impact financially. It's going to have an impact tax wise. It's going to have an impact contract wise. It's going to have an impact by the way you engage with your employees. It's going to have an impact on how you engage with certain types of people who may not be employees, and it is going to have a wide implications beyond what we are all thinking. Okay, this was considered to be a long due reform, and India has kind of implemented this, but large parts of it are old wine in new bottle. But there are new innovations which can be quite disruptive. So it's important for us to kind of know that. Where are we right now? We are in the last 15 days of the financial year. And as usual, the government will always expect you to be in compliance of all the laws at all points of time and give you no time to be ready for it. But how did this all start? As you know, the labor codes as acts of parliament were passed in 2019, 2020. That was the height of COVID, but there was a big push that India should move from being merely services oriented industry to a more manufacturing oriented industry so that we are able to attract manufacturing into India. That was the primary basis for it. It also felt that there are some sectors which are highly labor intensive and it really needed a reorientation. COVID happened. This shell got shelled because some of the states did not like it. And also we had tremendous amount of pickup in digital apps, e-commerce, and disruptive startups which came into picture. A huge amount of capital came into being. But even after that, there was a realization that it is important for us to reform our labor market in order for us to be competitive in the world. At the same time, to be able to extend some protection to workers and employees. With that, out of the bolt, on 21st of November 2025, the codes were notified. The codes were notified, not giving much time for anyone to kind of react to, except to say that it is from now onwards law. Once it happened, the codes are the basic framework on which the labor laws are being now put in forth. There are four codes which are put in place right now, and there are some uniform definitions and aspects which are very important for us to be able to consider, and we'll see that in the next few slides. The code by themselves cannot come into effect except for certain areas like gratuity and leave encashment. But there are rules that need to be prescribed with respect to certain other areas. Under the code itself, there was a requirement that there be a 45-day period, consultation period be provided before the rules are made into law. And therefore, on December 30th, just as we were turning the new year, the draft rules as per the central government came into picture. Some of the states also have put out the rules over a period of time. There was a 45-day period as a consultation period. All of us gave comments through association, through individually, through as firms. And 15th of February was the cutoff date for receiving all of these. And thereafter, the rules are now in the process of finalization. In the middle of all of this, they've been issuing some FAQs, many of which is duplicative, many of which are just rehashing what the law is, but in some cases, a little different than what the lawyers and the accountants understand this implementation, this law to be. While the FAQs are good guides for us to be able to organize ourselves, but by no means are they the law. It is merely an understanding of a bureaucrat or a set of bureaucrats, and it may or may not be accepted as the law by the courts, which ultimately will hold the pen on it. So now, in the process, after Feb 15, we are waiting for the rules to come out. Once the rule comes out, which is expected sometime in the month of March, closer to April, the minute the rules are notified, we will have the labor codes change and move from the old regime to the new regime. They're trying to align these along with the financial year start, which is April 1, 2026. They're very nicely clarified that you will now have no transition period. And therefore, if there any time to act, it is now. So that's the reason why this webinar is critical and for all of you to kind of take note of this. So here is where we are. We are going to talk about certain key issues and snippets that all of us should be keep in mind when we are dealing with this area. And with this, we'll go to the next slide. Really, as you know, as I said, this is a code which has come into picture from 21st of November 2025. It consolidates upwards of 40 laws which used to be scattered with different definitions, with different compliances, with different requirements, and so on and so forth. As you know, as an employer, apart from providing remuneration to your employee, you're also required to make certain contributions. You're also required to fulfill certain compliances, and you're also required to value and make payments of taxes. All of these were provided with respect to these laws, and now, in order to make sure that you don't have to go around searching different laws, they have consolidated all of these together in one place. I already spoke about the fact that you will not have much transition period. Transition period is today. My request is that all of you have today as the basis for the purpose of being able to do that. Raji will talk to us in a few minutes on how to provision some of these things. As you know, provisioning, certain provisions have already come into picture, gratuity being one of them, leave encashment being the other. And therefore, one of the critical steps that you will have to look at is when do you restructure your wage and wage code, and when do you ensure that you're able to implement it such that you do not face any problem from auditors, chartered accountants, and lawyers with respect to how you must and what amount you must provision. Getting it wrong can result in a much higher provisioning here and also certain restrictions on how you can restructure your wage itself. So if there is a time for action, it is today. And that's what I want to say. Raji, do you want to add anything with respect to provisioning, with respect to leave encashment or gratuity?
Absolutely well said, Badri. The time is now, and I definitely see that the entire accounting fraternity or the financial fraternity should take very serious note of it because, as you rightly said, the timeline for when it should happen. A lot of people are saying that it should all happen 1st of April because the timeline is 1st April and it's a part of the fiscal year. But the restructuring part, the question is why 1st April? Why not before? Because that was the one debate that we've had you and I also have had this debate, as to why should we just look at 1st April and why not before that? Because the provisioning that way becomes much easier, and any particular change which happens from 1st April is always more visible because of the law. So those are the two things that I thought I'll just pitch in with.
Excellent. Let's go forward. I think we will now get into some heart of the matter, as we say. Okay. Whom does the code apply to? Okay. Traditionally, labor codes applied to factories and were really focused on workers. That was the original thought process. You'll find a lot of definitions of what who's a worker being present in the Factories Act. Okay, and there the word used to be workmen as the base used to be. Labor laws also were always a bone of litigation. One of the highest litigations in this country is around labor laws, and many cases have gone to Supreme Court. And there's always a question and doubt whether labor laws will apply beyond just the manufacturing facilities and to other facilities also. Over a period of time, it crept into construction, and it really got a lot of visibility when we had the COVID crisis, when the migrants had to move from cosmopolitan cities like Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore to remote corners of India to back to their villages in order to sustain themselves. There were certain cesses which were imposed over a period of time to take care of migrant workers and workers who are working in the construction economy. There are also a lot of concerns that BPO sector, other sectors, did not have the kind of protection that maybe the manufacturing sector had. There's also some new things which are coming up in terms of gig economy, where a person is not wanting to have all of their time working for a particular industry or a particular company, but wanted to have flexibility, yet added value and worked under the instructions of the management or the executives. So a lot of new variations and new things came about in this process. The purpose of the codes is to kind of extend this beyond merely just manufacturing facilities, but to all parts of the industry. So don't think that this is a nice time to have a cup of tea and listen to the webinar and it does not apply to my sector. You'd be shocked that some of the biggest impact which this is going to have is going to be on the IT sector. Already companies like Infosys, Tata Communication Consultancy Services, and other Wipro and others have provisioned large amounts because of the ongoing and oncoming labor codes. It will have an impact on various other items too, and therefore it is important. This is one aspect of it. More importantly, is who is my employee and who is my worker. Okay, I'm going to ask Nurul because he explains it really well as to what are the different types of people that these codes are likely to cover. Nurul, why don't you tell us what
Sure.
these are and what is so fascinating about them?
Sure. See, the whole labor codes apply when there is employer and employee relationship. So the fulcrum on which the entire labor codes revolve and sit is this basis on which the provisions start to apply. There are various employer-employee relationship that have been categorized and recognized through the standing orders, etc. So, for instance, you can see permanent workers or employees, fixed term employees. We also engage people on contract roles. We are calling them as contract workers. And if you are bringing someone from a different state, we are calling them as interstate migrant worker. Even though gig and platform workers are not actually fitting into the employer-employee relationship, but for the purposes of extending the social security benefits, the gig and platform workers are now recognized. This is a new addition for the gig economy as such. So to say, firstly, we need to establish the employer-employee relationship. You may also at times face and see consultants who may be akin to an employee-employee relationship. There, you may also have to look at whether the supervision and control tests are satisfied or not to establish this. Once it is established, the consequential provisions start to apply to them.
Yes. And this has been a big debate, not only in India, but outside India also. I would recommend that everyone reads the very interesting judgment of the UK Supreme Court in Uber versus Aslam, where the question came whether the drivers who are employed by Uber for the purpose of their drop and pick are they independent contractors and not employees, and therefore there's no need for, say, social security and other things for these people, or are they deemed to be our employees? It went through a huge number of processes and factors to understand when someone is an employee, and came to the conclusion that the ability of the driver to be able to build an independent relationship with the customer and to follow through on the relationship thereafter is an important factor to determine that that is actually not an independent contractor but an employee. So there are various principles that the Supreme Court and the High Courts and even the foreign cases have all kind of brought into picture for the purpose of being able to identify this. So very important for us to understand how to categorize different people. One of the key things is contract worker. You cannot use the contract worker in your core activities. So important also to define what is a core activity, how you must go about it. These are all things that will come into picture. A lot of focus today is on wage, but all of these aspects are going to start impacting how you're going to go and engage with the labor code going forward in India. So let's go forward next. So one of the critical things that everyone is right now talking about and is something which is important for us to understand is what is a wage. Okay. I think sometimes what is a wage is more interesting for a fifth standard child to be able to answer than for experts like us to be able to agree on. Okay. So there are lots and lots of permutations and combinations. The one good thing is that at least today, and I'm saying at least today, there is one definition of wage. So four codes, one definition, and like I said, one India, one market was the famous saying that we had kind of brought about when GST was being implemented. So four codes, one wage, one India is probably something that we are probably going to move towards. It's welcome in very good level, but it also poses challenges because the different laws which have been consolidated into these four codes had different purposes, and therefore the wage definition for each of those purposes were different. When someone was being looked at gratuity, there was a requirement to include certain thing, exclude something. When it is for social contributions, there was something else. When it was for provident fund, it used to be something else. When it used for income tax, it used to be something else. Therefore, there was a requirement to have different types of wage definitions in different laws. But now, to ensure simplicity and uniformity, so that one cannot play one department against the other, there is a uniform definition of wage, the most significant in that regard. The definition of wage is something that needs to be understood in a proper manner. Otherwise, lots of issues can result from it. Like I said, one of the things about this wage definition is that parts of it or large parts of it are borrowed from previous definitions of wage. We've had large number of definitions of wage. We have a general understanding of what is a wage, and then there are specifics that have been included and excluded. So one of the things that we must keep in mind is that wage now includes all remuneration, whether by way of salary or allowances, paid as a part of your contract of employment. So you have a contract of employment, remuneration paid for it. That is general definition. So we have a means definition of wage, which includes all remuneration. In the past, there used to be remuneration or consideration and additional remuneration, additional consideration, not emanating from the contract of employment, but received or paid to the employee. That portion has been dropped. Therefore, it has some impact. Okay. So we are closely going to look at what's the meaning of the word remuneration, which is consideration for the services rendered under the contract. That is, what does a person say is my salary? Okay. I've always, when I've spoken to people in various organizations, people always talk about their salary as what they get as their fixed money in hand every month. Okay. Not necessarily what is going to be available as bonus or performance incentives at the end of the year. Generally, that's typically how it is. Even when negotiations happen for salary, everyone negotiates on the fixed component. Okay. Knowing that the other component is really left to God and the management for the purpose of being able to get. So one of the thought process is that whether that is remuneration for services. The second thing is in order to ensure that there is no gap between the understanding of the lawyers and the management and the accountants, they've specifically included that any amount which you're going to allocate towards basic pay, dearness allowance, and reading allowance will be included as wage. You cannot exclude it. Okay. So any amount that you call it as basic is there. Why was this done? This was done because in the past, there used to be a basic component, there used to be certain allowances, conveyance allowance, HRA, which is housing rent allowance, and there is something called special allowance, what we used to call as balancing allowance, okay, or what I like to call it as a lazy accountant allowance, because if whatever you didn't want to provide to a social contribution or anything, you added that as a special allowance, and then you allowed that allowance to operate. They've done away with that. They said we have to strike down this. The chart accountants are too smart. Okay, they know how to kind of understand income tax, understand the law, understand the wage structure, and they know how to minimize the financial impact. So we will kill this thing off. So they have not given any place for you to put special allowance. If you have a special allowance, either it must be an inclusion or it will be an exclusion. Then they have said certain exclusions where they feel that we do not want that to be included in the definition of wage for the purpose of contribution. It's still CTC, still receipts. So specific allowances such as conveyance allowance, value of accommodation, some annual bonus, some other allowances. These may or may not be remuneration, but have been included in this exclusion category, such that whenever you have to calculate for your contributions purposes, you need not look at these allowances. But as always, there somebody who has drafted this has spent a lot of time thinking about it. They say, however, if in case the allowances are more than 50% of the total amount of wage that you're willing to pay, then to the extent it is more than 50%, you'll add back to the wage definition such that the wage is including all of those components. So, a lot of issues with respect to how to interpret these and what can be included and what can be included. I can assure you that there is rich jurisprudence, confusing in nature, on how to interpret and look at it. It's important to keep that in mind when we take decisions with respect to that. It's also important to work on the terms and how, for example, uh, uh, the financial executives in your organization, the chartered accountants, and the lawyers understand these components to be. Because merely giving a nomenclature is not enough. There must be some substance to it. You cannot say my conveyance allowance is 50% of my this thing. It will only happen if a person is traveling from Mira to Delhi every day for the purpose of being able to do the work. Okay. So a lot of things with respect to how you're going to be able to do that. And last but not the least, we have something called in-kind payments. Okay, wages today are not just based on cash, but they're also looking at non-cash components, and they want to include some of these with respect to that. The recent FAQ has only added fire and flame to the understanding, which is always a bit of a problem. In effect, what it says is that if you have remuneration in kind, add back a value which can be attributed to the remuneration in kind back to the wage. Okay, but whether it should be added back to the basic part of the wage or whether it should add it to the exclusion of the wage, that they don't answer. Okay, and that's where the key lies. Okay, as to how to interpret this remuneration in kind. Okay, our remuneration in kind in the form of value of housing accommodation, should I include it as part of my wage or should I include as part of my exclusions? So those are questions that are still open ended and needs to be considered and looked at. So going forward, this wage is one of the important things that I think all of us should keep in mind. Zora, if you go to the next slide. Yeah. So one of the, I wanted to bring in Rajiv and Nurul on how to kind of go from here with respect to this. This is a basic background. Okay. You know that there is problems coming your way and you need to reapply. The government doesn't think that you have enough work at this point of time, and they're now wanting you to redo this. So now let's Rajiv and Nurul kind of tell us how you must kind of plan from here.
I'll just add something to, Badri, what you said, that you actually got us going all geared up saying what all must be understood. The fact is, there is so much more to do after it is partially or fully understood. If it's partially understood, it will be done and redone and re-redone. And if it's even if it's fully understood, I don't see how it will not be really done, because there are so many still loose ends that need to be tied. But we have to make a start somewhere, and that is where the initial and or immediate steps need to be defined in the whole thing. Well, there is again, it's important that there is a legal point of view on this whole thing, and there's an accounting part which comes in. So, I'll let Nurul speak about the legal part of it, but the let me just give you a little perspective of the financial aspect, and then I'll let Nurul give you the bit on policies and et cetera, the contracts and agreements, because that's something the legal fraternity does, for the living. But I'm just going to give you an idea about the number game that was just spoken about. Badri spoke about the number game. The issue is, how do you define wages? I mean, let's say legally interpreted well, and it comes to it. Suddenly, that wages, which defines the various costs around it, starts playing havoc in the system. Earlier it was different wages, as he said, for different laws. Suddenly, the entire wage definition has been changed, and they've been brought as a single piece. And there also, we are still playing around with how allowance will be treated, whether it be included, not included, how the the value of kind will be added here. They put a 15% cap there. Where will be added inclusion, exclusions, any benefit which is for the purpose of employment, will it be treated even if it's an allowance which is for the purpose of enhancing the employment, will it be added, which will not be added? So those are questions. Well, we can keep arguing till the cows come back home, but honestly speaking, there is no fine answer to it right now. And this is something we will, and there are so many more issues around this. And that's why, as I said, the intricacies, the topic was always meant to tell you, where the hell are we going to get stuck on these whole things? What he said is just a few part of it. But let Nurul speak about the issues around it, and then I'll come back to that.
Yeah, certainly, Rajiv. I will take up the first topic relating to the review of the compensation structures and the benefits framework. See, any industry will have several components as far as their wage policy. So pick up all the components. The first of the exercise that one must have to undertake is to recognize that what are the various components that have been paid, or where you the as an employer you have an obligation to pay or provide for. Whether it is remuneration in kind or not remuneration in kind, keep it all aside. Take all the components first in an Excel sheet and map them. The first of the exercise that you must undertake is to mapping all these components, whether it is to be included or excluded, etc. According to the inclusions and exclusions, then arrive at the overall remuneration. And there could be a possibility that certain components may not really be forming part of these inclusions and exclusions. Be that as it may, but firstly arrive at what is to be included and what is to be excluded, and arrive at the numbers. Do the number crunching and math there, and understand the 50% rule. The 50% rule is going to be playing the important role, because this is a mini-max rule or principle. What is mini-max? Minimum is your basic and DA should be at 50%, and it should not be lesser than 50% of it. And max rule is that overall exclusions should not be more than 50%. So you have this minimax rule which is out there. According to this, you have to start calculating, mapping the whole thing first, and then calculate the numbers as to the minimax theory or principle. Once you do this, you will be in a much better position to either add back or restructure it. First, understand the facts is an important fact of the things that you may have to undertake. Yeah. Rest of the things, I think you may be able to undertake and navigate this through. But more importantly, compliance and review of the policies in accordance with the new labor codes is going to be an important facet, because you may have to look at the codes as well as the rules. Again, which rule is going to be applicable to you, whether it is going to be a central rule or the state government rule. Accordingly, you may have to apply and recharacterize, repurpose all your policies, contracts, and understand the overall implications.
So one of the things I want you to do before Rajiv get in is these first four items are really waterfall items.
Yeah.
The first thing that I want you to do over the next 10, 15 days is to review the wage structure. Then figure out based on the new wage structure and the different requirement, what compliance that you need to do because you start moving towards that compliance. There will be overlaps because some of the states may not come online on 1st April.
Yep.
Then you have to be smart and rework the employment agreement, appointment letter, and so on and so forth to make sure that it is there, especially gig workers, contract labor, other things. How do we kind of manage that? And lastly, review HR policies because ultimately you cannot keep going back and looking at the law on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
I'm giving it over to this thing because all of this, or because the cost implication may not be on a day one basis. Rajiv will be able to explain to us a little bit more with respect to how you must kind of look at it. And at all points of time, be nimble to be able to rectify and work on the legacy issues. Rajiv, do you want to add anything to this?
No, this is a lot which is going to be covered in the next few slides. But yes, first things first was most important that you said there is nothing that's going to work as the next step if what you have just talked about is not addressed. It has to be addressed, and that's how we'll come to the next steps. And yeah, this is the waterfall issues, and they must be handled on a top priority. 2 weeks to go. A lot of it, at least, has to be thought through as to what's going to be there for the company in the year ahead. That's the way I look at it.
Correct. Let's go to the next slide.
So
I
let
think
me take this.
really over to you, Rajiv. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, interesting part that, what Badri and Nurul have just talked about itself is intricate enough. I mean, please understand that what they're trying to say is that whether you are an accountant, whether you are from the legal profession, or whether you are from the HR space, a lot of these questions need to be answered by you because they have immediate implications. So what we have kind of tried to do is we have tried to break this over the next two slides. One where we kind of look at the financial accounting, tax, and risk aspect, and the next is more a legal aspect. So we've kind of broken this also as we started saying that this is being looked at from a legal point of view and an accounting point of view. That's where the Jugalbandi comes in. Let me first tell you the financial impact. The most important thing we've just talked about is the wage definition. Now, while he says that we have put inclusion, exclusion, and there is a minimax rule here, which we says that 50% has to be done. Now, as we did in the past, and I'll just repeat that the wage definitions were different for different laws. Suddenly you realize that with the standard definition, everything is going to change. The impact of this are going to be felt in various parts of it. So, and don't forget that the law got implemented effectively November of 2025. So effectively, we are already there. Now, just look at how things get done. So the financial impact is already there for, let's say, from the time it has been notified till March 31st. So we are talking about a good about 4.5 months of provisioning. Number one. Number two, that means you'll have to go quickly revisit the numbers as to how the wage has to be calculated, as just was explained by co-panelists, where they have said how it is to be done. Once you have come to that, then you have to revise the impact of how it is going to be. Now, the revision could be at two sides. One side that he's talked about is the cost of the benefits or which are like social security benefits and provisioning for that, so on and so forth. There is also a tax side of it. So let's not forget that the tax gets impacted also. Now, how does the tax get impacted? Simple as that. I mean, without even getting into the definition, what the labor law or the labor code is going to talk about. If, say, for example, let's say you talk about a contribution and that contribution goes up or down, usually it will go up, but we'll talk about both sides of it. For let's say the PF, suddenly your deductions under Section 80 kind of changes. Now you might be putting this money away for a security, a social security, which is yours, but the impact of that can immediately impact either your structure, which means your take home, and Nurul Badri talked about the fact that people don't understand when you are used to a certain amount of money coming to where they don't care about where the money is going. They are clearly focused on one single fact: where is the money in hand? That's today. I mean, honestly, the industries that we've talked about, whether it was the GCC, whether IT is, this is all Generation Z. This generation actually doesn't even care about saving. Let me put it like this. For them, it's important that they have their money, or what we so called as a disposable income. So it's very, very important for them to understand what is the money that I'm getting in hand. Is my CTC getting impacted? Now, the moment you start saying, okay, fine, that CTC has to remain same because, I'm sorry, my take home has to remain same, then obviously you have to replay with the CTC. Now, the company, whether they want to play around with the CTC or not, is $1 million question. I mean, let's say Baker Tilly, we employ about 1,400 people. About 80% of these people are in that 30 and below space. Now, for them, this is the question that they want to really get answered, that is my money going to get cut? If that is not the case, then it's fine. But if that's the case, I really need to rethink. So that is one question. And from the and as I said, no answers for it. We've been doing some restructuring for people of our clients who have already been there, and another set of clients who are now just setting up. And one of the questions that we are constantly debating on both cases as to, they are saying we do not want to increase our CTC. From 1st April, anyways, there will be a revision. Should we take the CTC impact as the 1st April impact, or should we just forget about it at all? That's one thing. The other set of guys are saying, no, 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 make sure that you restructure the salary in a way that the CTC doesn't go up. Good question. I wish I had a magic wand and I would have done that and everything gets done. It doesn't get done. And the third set of people are saying that, oh, there is a tax law also. I mean, if the tax impact is going to come soon, which is the new direct tax code, the implication of that should also be taken here. Now, that is clearly what we are talking about to say. So, honestly speaking, we have no answers for what is going to be the case. It's only time that will decide as to what is going to be. We still need rules, we still need clarifications, it's so on and so forth. But questions are clearly the ones which I have just debated. For the CFOs and the CEOs, the question is also that on the year end, how are you going to be doing your accruals for various social security benefits? Obviously, for that you'll have to go back to the basics, as Nurul said. Plot every wage. Define what is wage for each category of them, and based on that, you'll have to redo the working based on what's it. I'll give you a very funny story. I'm not trying to be critical here, but recently we were trying to reach out to an actuarial work and told them, we need to do valuation and there is a new thing and that has to be done as per the financials disclosure, etc., etc. Would you please tell us what do you want from us so that we can prepare the wage structure and send it to you so that you can look at it? He said, well, just send it to us, the old one at this point of time. Even we don't know what's happening, so we'll just take the best estimate. Now, that's an estimate. They can get away with that. Unfortunately, as a CFO, you cannot get away with that. That's the sad part of it. But all I'm trying to say is, even in the actuarial field, people are still not sure about how the basic information is to be churned to get out there on the whole thing. So that's one part of it. The second part is, and I've talked about preparing the financial year. Now, the accounting and the audit is a very important part of it, because come April, the auditors will be sitting on your heads, and in fact, they might already be sitting on your head because people have closures. So the payroll reconciliation and accountings will be the first thing that they're going to ask. The second thing they'll be asked about the disclosures. The accounting standards require certain disclosures, whether it is what is the provisions, how is the structuring has been done. It will have an impact on deferred tax asset, etc., etc. So there will be a disclosure there. What is the measures that have been taken by the C-suite to, or the financial department or the HR department to work out these numbers, documentation, controls, etc., etc. And then the impact will have to be shown in the financial statements. Now, these financial statements, it will be, of course, either a P&L item, or since it may be a one-off, it could also be, one of the schools of thoughts is that it should be separately disclosed and as an additional item, and or at the same time make some notes to accounts where you will disclose these things. Similarly, the impact of all these accruals will come on how we calculate the bonuses. Now, bonuses are not applicable to certain industries, but to the industries that they are applicable, one has to clearly define how the allowable surplus will be calculated and how the bonus liability will come. The question that we often are getting from a lot of our clients, since we have a lot of expatriate community that we are talking about, how will they get treated? I think I'm sure there are questions in the chat board also about this. The fact of the matter is that a lot of these expats come on short-term contracts. They do not necessarily come for long-term. Even for the visa, they have to clearly specify when they apply for the visa, uh, you know, what is the period for which you are going? So they're right, probably 2 years, 3 years. I mean, we do a lot of Japanese expats. Most Japanese expats will come for 2 years, extendable by another 1 year, 3 years. Now you are talking about employment, which is not 5 years, but are they under the fixed term employment? Yes, they will come under the fixed term employment. And therefore, because of that, earlier they were only covered under the provisions of Provident Fund. That also where the SSA was not applicable. But now they will come under the provision of gratuity as well. And therefore, one has to start making the provision. What is the salary for this gratuity is another question, whether it be only salary here, whether it be gross salary. Who are understanding the entire salary will be taken as a cost to be done there. So that is another question for which provisioning has to be done. As a result of which the tax withholding, etc., will have to be worked out quite quickly on this thing. The second impact is because all this cost impact, all the so-called GCCs, etc., which work on cost plus entities, which is the largest operating model that we have for all the global capability centers, all of them have a cost plus entity, and therefore with that cost plus, you will all have to be relook at the numbers. If the cost is going up, the transfer pricing kicks in, you have to redo your transfer pricing clearly on the whole thing. And on the risk side, remember, while all this is happening, your internal auditors, some have even internal auditors within the business, some have external auditors who are so-called internal auditors, but they're external firms. They are going to get after your lives to say, what are you doing about gig workers? What are you doing about contractual workers? How are you documenting it? How are we taking care of the social security issues, etc., etc., etc. Now, Badri just talked about this, clearly saying that these are all which are becoming important, and there is a specific emphasis on taking care of this section of the workers also. Now, obviously, manufacturing or let's say construction industry or banking for that matter, hospitality, which tends to hire a lot of contract workers, seasonal workers, and so on and so forth. They are really going to be asked these questions and see what they are going to do about it. So that's really the risk assessment. Let's quickly move on to the next slide, Laura, so that, and this is where Nurul, you could come in quickly to explain the impact.
Yeah, certainly. So on the legal front or on the contract side or on the policy side. So first and foremost is pick up all the policies what you have and see whether they're in line or alignment with the new labor codes or not. For instance, you have the leaves that are provided under the OSHW code for workers. Now, what about the employees? Are they also going to be governed by the OSHW code? The answer is also yes and no, because we have to also look at the respective states, shops and establishments act. Now, firstly, we have to understand whether an employee is a worker or an employee other than workers. So once we categorize between the employee and worker, the natural consequence is going to be in terms of the applicability of the relevant rules or provisions of each of the laws. Like OSHW code largely provides for the leave policy for the workers. Then for employees, we may have to look at the States, Shops and Establishments Act. So the S&D Act of the respective states are going to be also playing an equal role. And at times, you may also find some difficulty or overlapping provision between the OSHW code and the state-specific S&D Acts. Recently, the Ministry of Labor and Employment have clarified that in case of there is any overlap, naturally the central legislation will prevail. But in case if there is any more beneficial provision
Yes.
in the state-specific legislation, that has to be given the go ahead. So you may have to look at carefully with reference to your policy framing. Now, as far as the statutory compliances are concerned, now it's going to be one portal where all the forms and registrations are going to take place. Everything is going to be transitioned into Shram Suvidha portal where all the registrations will be taking place. Everything is going to be digitized, and most likely the information may at times be also passed on to the other departments as well. Like when the department is going to come for an inspection, then they may be looking at the returns, whatever has been filed with the income tax authorities or with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and look at what is this staff welfare expenses that have been shown in the books of accounts, and that's going to be the first document to reconcile with the returns that they have filed on the Shram Suvidha portal. So the reconciliation is going to be a key item that is going to be there. And in terms of the legal issues, I know a lot of decriminalization process has been considered while framing the labor codes. But at times, see, the entire kind of flexibility or discretion is not being taken away from the hands of the labor inspectors, who are now being rechristened as inspectors come facilitators. So the amount of penalty has been made manifold. So you may have to be very conscious about the non-compliances as such.
Thank you. Very interesting. So another intricacies, if you can just go to the next slide, Dora, because we are running out of time, and I'll just go rather quickly for the rest of the things. But this, this facilitator bit that was just spoken by Noor is very important. That while we are looking at this whole thing to end the so-called Inspector Raj, they have been given the role of a facilitator, which means they'll probably come and tell us how we should be doing things. I don't know whether we want to hear that or not. But the fact of the matter is, the interference has moved from more from
Facilitator to whom? Whether facilitator to the industry, facilitator to the government.
and you're talking about a digital interference by a set of people who do not know how to work in the digital world. So we are really having a bit of a complex situation here. But quickly let you bring you a little bit about a perspective about how the cost control and compliance alignment. A lot of this is now going to be digital. Everything is going to be digital. I mean, the way we have seen them, the GST side, everybody thinks digital. Here, of course, no manual thing. As a result of which, a lot of work needs to be done on understanding the digital side of it, how it works, and obviously quickly transitioning into the whole thing. Now, that is also a cost. Please remember, getting into the digital world, it's not going to be a cost. It's going to be a cost. You have to work around it. You probably have to train people for it. You will make mistakes. You'll fix it. It goes on and on. Making mistakes is easy. Fixing it is a mammoth job in our country. And I mean, the GST experience has been very bad. And from the point of view that every time it went wrong, and the accountants were always to be blamed that you guys don't know how to do it, not realizing that the system was ineffective for very many things. And this is where your legal guys or your HR guys or accounting guys will have a tough time. Be careful. Just be kind to them. Now, so the second part is because the coverage on Social Security has gone up, the cost of Social Security will also go up. So that's a very, very big thing that is going to have. Another big thing that they came out with is saying that anybody who leaves, the full and final has to be done in 48 hours, 2 days. I mean, God save the HR guys, because in 2 days, I can tell you they just cannot gather all the information that is required from various departments. I mean, forget anything. The timesheets may not have been filled. Let's talk about us as accountants, if they don't fill the timesheets, we are still supposed to give them. I don't know. If they don't hand over the property of the company back to them, are we still supposed to give it to them? I don't know. So the question is, can you imagine the complexity of doing closing a full and final in 48 hours? It will be a nightmare, number one. Number two, look at industry where a lot of people keep coming and going, where the labor turnover is very high. What do? You'll have to probably hire a person who's doing just this. I mean, there is no AI system that can do this for you. Trust me, it's just not possible. So for us, it's a nightmare. I mean, look at the way where we run kind of outsourcing to people. If they come to us and say, will you be able to do it? We said, yes, you'll be able to do it, but we'll have to hire somebody specifically who's sitting on your premises, because we don't know who's going today and who's going tomorrow. And if every day there are cases like this and 48 hours we have to do it, we're going to be charging you extra only to make sure that the time of that guy is used effectively for your kind of business. So, I mean, I'm giving you some things here which is important. Rest, you can read it and understand. Just go on to the next slide, because I want to talk about, and I will come to this later. Just go to the next slide. Yeah, it's very important. So they are the four stakeholders here, the employee, the employer, the society, and the government. These are the four stakeholders, and how are they getting impacted? That's the quickly, important. Let's talk about the employee first, because employee is the most important. So, there is a take-home impact we already talked about, so I'm not going to talk about it. Long-term security benefits may increase because people are moving, because of the increase in social security. A lot of companies give voluntary, contribution to the fund. So if overall wage definition, if it goes up and people decide that I'm not going to change it, let's for a minute. So the social contribution goes up on social security benefits. So suddenly that will increase the overall cost, but that you get after a period of time. Your immediate amount is getting impacted. So that's a bit of a case. Work from home, we all did. A lot of things was done during the COVID, but there were no regulations. There were not something which was formal to that. Now they've said, of course, there are conditions to work from home. It's not that anybody can work from home. There are consent issues and so on and so forth. But there is a clear provision in the law. And tax benefits, as I said, it's going to impact now. And should the direct tax code come again, it'll impact again. So we do not know where to start, where to restructure, where to stop, and how to restructure if the new tax code comes again. So that's the problem with the employee. Let's talk about employer. Nurul just mentioned we have to revise the entire, HR policies, the contracts, wage structures, and revise it and re-revise it, because still the rules are not out. And then there is this clause which says if this benefits less and this benefits more, but that benefits more, go to that. Just look at okay, let's look at the law firm here and the accounting firm here who are talking to you. We have 9 locations, they have some 14 locations. Now imagine there are 14 shop and establishment acts which are playing havoc in the system, which are not subsumed in this labor code, and there are beneficial clauses in there. So the Chennai office will close for 20 days, the Delhi office will close for 14 days. We don't know how it is to be played around. There has to be some kind of a clarification coming out, although they have said that the central law, if you have multiple branches, should play. I do not know where it stands as a whole. But yes, I've already talked about inspector cum facilitator. This is a question that the employees will have to deal with quite stringently, because I don't know how it's going to play out. Right now, we are used to a system that is working well. Any shift will bring it's all nuances which are going to be. The biggest problem that employer we see is going to have is training the people to understand the new regulation. Everybody will just come and say, I don't care. I just want things to happen the way we were doing, and why there's a change, and I don't know how to go about it. Every now and then they'll be rushing back to your desk saying, but why is this not happening, and why is that not happening, and why is this not happening? So the employer is going to have a bit of a challenge there, and I would recommend that you should conduct serious training for people who are working with you, so that they understand the consequences of that. Although the society as a whole should benefit, because one good thing is that every change comes with challenges. So I'm not saying these are not good. They are good because a lot of if we have to become the third largest economy, we just cannot say we are not going to take care of the labor regulation. We have to take care of it. In fact, CSR, labor policies and all, a lot of accounting and law firms, if you go to the United States of America, they actually disclose the fact how it's done that. It's good for getting employment. For the employer also does it, but it's good. Gender equality has been another issue that has been addressed in this. And of course, the gig workers, the contract workers who were really not looked after. I mean, we guys are all living in cities and we see something very different. Go to smaller towns and see what's the condition of these people, and you realize that by doing this, it is going to overall improve the welfare of the people. And of course, overall ease of doing business is something that we're going to do. We may not have time for question answers, but I see a lot of question answers that have come in into the chat box, and we'll try and answer most of these questions. Somebody asked about the ESOPs. ESOPs are not included, so it is a part of the exclusion. But we are trying to answer the other question as quickly as possible. And with all due regard, let me just sum it up since we are running out of time.
Yeah, no problem at all. Go ahead, Rajiv.
So let's go to the next step. So no, just go to the next steps first before we kind of come to this. Yeah. So important things after we've done it, an in-depth understanding of the labor codes must be done. And this is something has been said even in the initial steps, and we are still talking about this. Stakeholders have to be educated. Restructuring of cost, we have clearly said, and establishing a full and final settlement protocol has to be clearly defined. The framework of reporting and compliance must be done because, as I said, mistakes can cost you dearly. The documentational requirement for having contracts and so on and so forth, which has been mandatory under the law, has to be done. We can't do much about it. One question which we didn't talk about, and we still just quickly touched, is about what is the role of a principal employer. If you are having I'd actually thought I'll request the lawyers to talk about, but we've run out of time. We'll do it another day. But quickly tell you that please remember that there was a principal employment issue even before. It's still there, except that with all this coming in, you have to be very clear that the third parties or vendors that you are kind of hiring are taking care of all this. It doesn't, because your responsibility is not getting diluted. So this part is equally important for you to run a very close due diligence, as we call it, on the vendor audits, which may be important, especially in the manufacturing space and the hospitality space where they are contract workers and so on and so forth. So that's the other part of it. Now we can go to the quickly sum up the whole thing. Just to sum up, we are in very interesting times. There's a fair amount of work to be done, and I'm repeating what Badri said. The stakeholders must have to be considerate to understand these issues. Everybody has to be a little considerate. It is going to be very tough to start because a lot of work to be done. But as time goes by, as we understand, as the clarification comes, it will get better. There will be more as we walk along. There will be, as I said, rules have to come out, states have to come out, clarifications will come out, more FAQs will come out. Whether they confuse us or they clarify is a question, but that is going to happen. The appropriate authorities have to come around to resolve conflict. There will be conflicts, and the authorities have to actually help. Otherwise, it's going to be chaos. The Inspector Raj, as I said, will end in one way and start another way. And overall, I would say it is good for the business. So as I said, we are definitely in for happier times, and hence the smiley. That's pretty much it. There are questions in the chat box, which we'll try, and some I think Nurul has already responded to quite a few. There are some others which are there. We'll try and respond to you on the chat box itself. I don't think we can take more time here. In fact, Badri has been kind enough. He's actually in the middle of a hearing, and he's moved out of that hearing and come to us only to be present for this webinar. Nurul is always on top of things. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for all your time and all very special inputs. This discussion would have been meaningless without your very precise understanding and explanations that you've given to the audiences today on how the legal side will pan out. I mean, without that, the second stage of any discussion would fall through unless we've addressed the issues that you have been kind enough to bring forth in this discussion. So thank you very, very much for all your time and explanations.
Thank you,
and
Rajiv.
We look forward to working with you.
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv. And like I said, I think it's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting us. I second all the things that Rajiv has said. I think it's very important for us to be prepared. And like I said, it's a jugalbandi. You need to understand the legal parts of it. You need to understand the tax part of it, the accounting part of it, the financial part of it, and the compliance part of it. So I think, like I said, I wish all of you the very best. And with that, Rajiv, thank you so much for inviting me and Nurul.
For all the participants, thank you very much for making time for us. It was wonderful to have you over.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.